Vice President Farley, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, I went to eat, when I left there last time, I went down to the cafe there and ate. It was really good.
Oh, did you like it?
Yes, I did, I did. I ended up sitting
for a minute so Mr. Duncan can officially start the meeting.
Okay.
Good evening and welcome. It is 6 p.m. Thursday, December the 17th. The chair calls this regular meeting, the Sumner County Board of Education, to order. Regarding roll call, let the minutes reflect that all 5 board members are present in the building. Mr. Brogan, will you lead us with invocation, pledge of allegiance?
Father in heaven, I just want to thank you, Lord, for giving us another day. Thank you, God, for help and strength we have to take on our daily tasks. Father, we thank you for all the staff of Summers County Schools. Thank you for the ones that are here tonight. Show their interest in the ongoing county business. God, we just pray that you go with us through this meeting. Help us to give the appropriate attention to each item on the agenda. May all that we say and do be for the betterment of Summers County Schools. We pray in Jesus' name. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're now at item 3, approval of agenda with adjustments. Mr. Ward, would you mention something to me?
Yeah, we need to remove the first person on the personnel items. After speaking with Howard Super from Bulls Rice, this is no reflection on this person. They're already a sub, so they really can't be hired or put in a position because they're already covering, it's a sub position. So there really is no position for them to fill. They are covering that teacher's position right now. So basically, he said that it is confusing because with personnel laws, and it's good that Trey's here to hear some of this, he said with service personnel, that's one thing, but professional, you already have a sub, you do not have to hire that person. They're already on the sub list, therefore they can take that the rest of the school year or however long you need that person in that position. So you do not have to hire this person. They already are hired as a sub.
Chair moves that we strike item 14, professional, as per the request of the superintendent. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion on the floor, chair, seconded by Vice President Farley, that this board strike item 14, professional, as per the request of the superintendent. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Let the minutes reflect 5-0 vote. Item 14, professional, has been stricken. Anybody see anything else? Looks like we have a presentation up there, so we don't need to make a change there. Anybody see anything else that you want to change or order or strike? Okay, chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, subject to the previous strike.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented, with item 14 being struck.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Angel, second by Mr. Grogan, that the board approve the agenda as presented to us by the superintendent, excluding item 14, professional, which was struck by a motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 5 votes in the affirmative. This agenda has been approved for tonight's meeting. Any public comment?
There were none.
Okay. That brings us to presentation, and looks like from Bowles Rice, Trey Marone is going to give us policy updates. Are you ready? I'm disappointed you took the hat off.
Oh, well, we don't want that.
Oh, okay, all right. You proceed any way you want. I
Good,
understand.
good evening. You know, I actually liked it on. I thought maybe I looked silly, but I'll leave it on. Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, President Duncan, Superintendent Warble, Vice President Farley, all board members, and anyone else who's present that can hear me. Good evening, there in Summers County from Wayne County. I wanted, to give you an update on the conduct or the comprehensive review and the revisions to the board policies that we're engaged in, basically to, help your policies to reflect current legislative mandates and best practices. Want to let you know that the initial review of your policy manual is underway. Your policies, of course, were already organized by category, but we also have organized them based on the date of last review. As you know, one of the points I'll say is that that some of the policies had not been reviewed in quite some time. So we've also got them organized based on the date of last review, and that is for the purposes of prioritizing those policies that when they're presented to you, you will see probably in the front end more of the policies that are older that doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying right now will necessarily mean they have to be revised, but they need to be reviewed. As you know with your own policy manual, that when you pull a policy, you can see when it was adopted and when it was reviewed and whether it was repealed. You kind of have the history there of the board's actions over the years. Some of you have been on the board longer than others, so that's very important in your record keeping to have that in your policy manual. So I can't say that I know that your policy hadn't been reviewed, some of them since 1974, but I know that's what it says on it. So what we want to do as part of this review is to get eventually every policy in front of you that you can update, over a period of time, that you can update that date to show that you have reviewed it more currently. That's important because part of your your work as a board member and as a policymaker is to promote school board effectiveness. And you actually have a policy on that, and of course the state code on that, and that's part of your obligation is to review policies. So what we'd like to see is that to become part of the systematic part of your board meetings on a regular basis. So you'll see those over time. There were more than 20 policies that fell in that category, and there's a substantial number of policies that haven't been reviewed in some time. So I tell you that it's something you already know, but I tell you that so that you'll understand a little bit about how the policies will be rolled out to you. You have you have 171 policies. I mentioned that to you last time, and your policies are divided up into 8 categories, which are well identified categories, and they're identified by Roman numerals. Then you have a letter for a subcategory, and then you have a number for a specific topic. So I only point that out to you to say, so I don't, to avoid confusion in my communication, if I refer to something as chapter, 2, Article B, Section 1, I mean 2B1, and I may just call it 2B1 in shorthand, but just so you'll know that the breakdown there, that's how I'm referring to the policies. As we roll out the policies, most of the policies that will come to you will be vetted through your central office first. Those are your more specific day-to-day policies that affect things that the central office is administering on a regular basis. So those policies would go through those personnel in the central office that have been assigned to those areas. I've been given a list of those personnel, and I'll be reaching out to each one of them as those policies are being vetted to be presented to you as a board. Some policies will come directly to the board through the superintendent. I will always communicate to you through your superintendent, but the policies that will come directly to the board would be those, for example, on the organization and general administration of the board. That's your chapter 2. You'll start seeing some of those in January. To be more specific, like the first policy you're going to see from me is policy 2B4, your policy to promote school board effectiveness. That's a very important policy to start with because that's one of the reasons why we're here and doing this policy review is about school board effectiveness. And also, that's your policy on policies, if that makes sense. You have a policy about policy making, and that's what it is. It's policy 2B4. If you're familiar with the specifics of that, you've got language in there about how frequently you should review your personnel policies and other policies, and how much time you put them out for comment. I think that your policy says 2 weeks. So those are things, that's your policy on policy making. So we want to do that one up front. You'll have that in front of you in January to be reviewing, because we want to get that one in place clearly the way you want it going forward. There's another reason for that policy to be up front, is because that's a policy that's required under West Virginia Code 18514. Every county board is required to have a policy like that. You do have a policy. 2B4 is your policy in place. However, it was last reviewed in 2012. In 2019, as the legislature does, they rewrote section 18515 and added a number of new requirements for county boards to include in their policies. So because of the nature of this review project and the way it came about, I think it's very important for you to have that as your very first policy up for consideration review. So we make sure it's current. It's current under current standards, and it's going to guide you going forward on your policy review and policy making project. So that'll be the first policy presented to you. You'll see that in January. Also in January, we'll be rolling out policies to you that are mandatory policies. You know, any policy that's been mandated either by state code or the State Department, you're required to have in place. So, you know, I've identified a few already that you need to have. I don't necessarily see in your policy manual. So you'll see things, you know, like on the open enrollment policy. Some of these are fairly recent, and you know, House Bill 206 and 2019 we had 4 new policies that came out of that legislative session. But going forward, as I think I mentioned when I came down, we monitor that stuff every year and do a very detailed summary of every legislative change and board policy that's dictating that county boards have to have certain policies. So going forward, it'd be much easier to maintain and update as you're required to do so. There were not 4 new policies required this year, but there was a Title IX policy required this year. All county boards should have a new Title IX policy in place in August. So, you know, that's something that's more current. So we want to make sure that you have mandatory policies on your books. A lot of boards adopt policies that they don't necessarily have to have, but they want to have, and you're allowed to do that. But we will probably put those lower on the priority list because we want to get in front of you what we view as the most important policies, which would be ones that govern, you know, what you're doing here in this project. And number 2, the policies that are mandatory. And the third group of policies that you're going to see early on are going to be personnel policies. There are some mandatory personnel policies. There's one on qualifications we need to make sure that you've got, you know, on the books, because the law changed on that last year as well. And you're getting ready to enter personnel season, and decisions regarding your professional personnel are driven by qualifications now, and it didn't used to be that way. So you want to have a policy in place to address that. Your personnel policies, as you probably know, are the lion's share of your policy manual. You have 171 policies, but you have 54 personnel policies. So, you know, that's not quite a third, but it's 30-some% of your policies are personnel policies. So that's obviously the largest group of policies that you have, and personnel season's coming, so we want to prioritize those, especially the ones that you need during reduction in force season. I don't know if you even need to. I do know, I saw in the news where you had the approval on your consolidation. So, you know, there's a whole statutory procedure on that, on staffing things, on mergers and consolidation. So you'll have probably a more, you know, not your normal usual personnel season in Summers County. I mean, and it may not be that it's, you know, till next year, but you want to be prepared for those. I don't know what the timeline is on your project, by the way, is what I should say. So, you know, those policies, the personnel season policies that you need for this personnel season, will also be towards the front end of the project. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I'll be happy to take questions too, is what I call the overpopulated policy manual. I'm not saying that your policy manual is overpopulated. You know, a lot of counties have a lot more policies than you do, but, you know, a lot of counties just do a wholesale adoption of a large number of policies, many of which are not even required. You know, your policy requirements come from either the state code or the state board. And, you know, I always wonder why a county adopts a policy and just cut and paste what's in the state code. Because if your policy is the same as the state board policy or the state code, why have your own policy? Now, if you have, you know, flexibility to adopt your own local policy, then that's a different story. You have the freedom to do that, but sometimes I wonder if they're just, you know, it's almost kind of like we're just adopting, you know, this because it's been put in front of us. For example, I work with some counties, they don't have a local employee code of conduct, but they just rely on the state board's code of conduct. And then other counties will have the exact same policy in their own policy manual that's in the state board policy manual. So, you know, let me just kind of put that in perspective before I leave that point. You know, like I mentioned, you have 171 county board policies, and a lot of counties have even more than that. But the State Board of Education, now think about it, the State Board of Education, how many policies do you think the State Board of Education has? You have 171. Anybody want to take a guess?
Less than that?
Less than that? You're right. There's a good guess. 75. The State Board of Education that's controlling the whole, you know, the whole state as far as the education system goes, I mean, at least not but through their policies, they have 75 policies. So, you know, and I can also tell you that I have a document that, you know, a historical document that we've created that will identify every mandatory policy that you have so we can make sure you have those in place. But mandatory policies are around that same number for county boards. So county boards can have a lot less policies. And I mentioned before when I was there that one thing you might think about as you go through this project is, do we really need this policy? Do we really want this policy? Because you can repeal a policy as long as it's not mandatory. Because again, I think sometimes people or counties, you know, they just adopt a lot of policies because they think they're supposed to or have to. So I think that's something that part of the process should always be part of the conversation. So to summarize, you know, I'll be again rolling some policies out to you in January to start considering. The very first one is going to be the one for you. It's going to be a revision of 2B4 that you have on school board effectiveness. And you will also start seeing policies that are mandatory that you need to have on your books. Personnel policies will be the next group too. And then you'll see policies that just warrant review. And you may not change it, but you want to at least document that you've reviewed it. Now, what we'll do is, instead of overloading you up front with all these very, you know, the mandatory, they'll be in there, but you're going to have kind of a combination, because I've been in your shoes, and, you know, there's nothing worse than getting a stack of 25 policies and say, oh, can you read this? Come to the next board meeting and be prepared to vote on it. So what we'll do is there'll be kind of a mixture of policies. You'll have some that are identified for you as mandatory policies, so you know we've got to do stuff on this. But then there'll be some policies in there that are just kind of extras that you might not even want to you know, do anything on right away. But at least you won't get this, I guess, a heavy bag of policies every time is what I'm trying to say. So I've covered a lot of things there, and I hope I've covered the kind of things that you were looking for. But if you have other questions or any questions about what I've said so far, I'll be glad to answer those.
I would think that we would be interested, as we look at the whole spectrum of the 171 and the ones that you're going to be adding that are mandated that we don't have. I would think that as a board, we're going to want to have a work session. Look, there may be some of those we just absolutely don't need, and if we can streamline it, then we would trust your guidance on that, and I think we would do that if we can streamline it.
Yeah, any policy
Okay.
that might perhaps be redundant or.
Yeah, something that's redundant. And you may, I'm sure you will identify some that you're just going to say, you absolutely don't need this policy, and if you do, we want.
And there's, you know, different counties have policies sometimes on things you're thinking, But they want to say, here's what our policy is on this. It may involve, employee uniforms. It may involve things that, other boards don't want to even, be involved with. So you can have policies on things because, if you want to control it, then you need to have a policy on it. But if you really don't, or you want to defer to the way the State Department or the state code controls the situation, this is, I think, probably the most important thing I can say there. You as a board member, you can always rely upon what the state code and the education laws or the state board policies say if you need those policies. You know what I'm saying? Those are available to you as your policies. I mean, you following the state law or state board policy is not only required, it is basically, indirectly part of your policy manual, if that makes sense to you.
It does.
So there's no reason to duplicate. If a state board policy, I always use the employee code of conduct because that's one most people know about. But so many counties have the exact same policy, and it's okay. But, some counties just use the 5902 out of the state board policies, and when they do discipline, that's a lot of times it's based on that, and they just cite policy 5902. You are allowed to rely on those state code provisions. So. I'll be glad to give you my 2 cents, and you'll get an extra 2 cents from me because as I did tonight, and it's hard for me not to, I'm always going to probably throw in my 2 cents as a former board member, because I've been there. I mean, and I know kind of what things look like from your seat, and I'll be glad. And I'm not in Summers County. I'm not suggesting that I know how to, that, but I'm just saying I can appreciate being a board member and dealing with policy and policy making and policy review. But I think once we get through this project, if you kind of make a whether what kind of routine it is, whether you have something once a month on your agenda, whether you may or may not have stuff, but get some sort of systematic review of your policies in place, it'll be a much less daunting task than what you're facing now. So.
Do any members have any questions or points you'd like to make to Trey? Well, Trey, we're looking forward to see what kind of hat you have on next time.
Okay.
So, and we appreciate your presentation. It was very well presented, very clear, and the fact that nobody has any questions, I guess you can take the hat off and turn the machine off.
You're welcome, and you will, like I said, the first policy I mentioned to you, you'll have that ready to look at your first meeting in January.
Superintendent Ward, will you have any thoughts or anything?
Thanks, sir.
No, the only thought I have, Trey, is I appreciate you helping us out, and I'll get you a Summers County hat to wear at the next board meeting.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, and have a
all.
nice holiday.
Have a good evening. You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
At this time, we will proceed. We have a presentation by Christy Schaefer, a book study on Weston. Say that for me.
Kitchnick.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that. Bold School, and Christy, we want to thank you in advance, and you're on.
Thank you so much. Some of the staff at Hinton area had attended the math conference last year and attended a session by Mr. Kitchnick, and was really entertaining, really informative. And we were looking for a book to do a book study. We usually do one per year. So we decided to use this book, Bold School. And what Bold School is, it's old school wisdom with new technologies and combining those for blended learning. So Mrs. Megan Weichel and Mrs. Amber Martin and myself conducted this book study for 6 weeks. And it was a study on different technologies to use into the classroom to get students more involved. And one of the things that he really focuses on is raising the relevance and the rigor of the classrooms. We had a couple meetings. Then Dr. Edwards was in the lab working with some teachers, and that's where my home base is. I was in there, and I got really inspired by him and his teachings. And so I spoke to Mrs. Weichel and Mrs. Martin and asked them if it would be okay that we would change up what we're doing a little bit, because I was inspired by him, and of course they agreed, so we worked together and kind of changed up and changed one of the things that we talked to, that Dr. Edwards was talking about was teaching at a higher level. instead of we talked about, I think we talked about in our, was it the last meeting, our DOK 1, DOK 2, 3, and 4, that you should be teaching at DOK 3 and 4. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you know, that really inspired me. And that's what the basis of this book was getting students to those higher standards. So we kind of switched, the three of us got together, put our heads together, and kind of changed things, and the staff really liked it. One of the things that they talk about in this book was you teach your standards, then you bring your strategies in to help with your standards. Once you have that, then you bring in the technologies to add on. That your focus is not on the technology, your focus that Mr. Kiechnik was talking about in the book was focusing on your standards and the strategies and adding technology. And it was a really interesting approach to it. The staff really liked it. A lot of good technologies. Came out with a plan of what they're going to add some new technologies. So the goal was to add two new technologies and not move from that until the students use it proficiently. Instead of throwing a lot in at one time, a few at a time until they're proficient, then you continue to add more. So that was basically what the book study was about, and working with teachers with blended learning.
Any questions by anybody?
There were teachers at Hinton area and a teacher at Talcott also participated. We opened it up if other schools wanted. We did face-to-face sessions and virtual lesson sessions if people wanted to join.
How will you be disseminating how many people participated in it?
I think there was 13.
13?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to disseminate any really important things to other people that didn't?
Well, we have, we put everything in a Google Classroom, our conversations, and we can share that out. And we've been adding, we're the technology team, once a month, sends a technically speaking publication for staff. So we can include some of the strategies in that and some of the technologies in that to help with the staff who didn't attend.
Okay. Questions, anyone?
I appreciate you taking the initiative.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're fortunate to have Ms. Schaefer. She's not only a leader, but she's very positive. And I finally saw she had a bad day, and she said, "I just feel prickly today." And I'm like, "What?" But you know what? She did smile right after that. So you talk about a wonderful person to be around and a great educator and leader. We are truly blessed to have her with us, and leading a book study is great. And she's also wearing a nice polo about technology. The technology team, they wore that in here last week, and they all wanted me to notice their swag, if you will. And so they look good, and we were very fortunate to have the team we have leading our technology efforts, because it is never a dull moment with public education. And I like with that book, and that gentleman there, I saw him 2 years ago in this state. And one thing I liked about it is technology should be the last thing you worry about. You have to look at what you're teaching in the classroom and get that understanding before you bring all that other stuff in. Because all that is extra stuff, and if you don't know how to do that, then it's not going to work. You have to know your craft first, and then get the other stuff in there. So I think it's wonderful that Ms. Schaefer's leading that effort. So pretty cool.
Okay. Moving on to item 6, approval of minutes. And these are minutes for December 3rd, 2024 minutes of regular meeting. All members have copies of that.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as read.
I'll second.
There's a motion on the floor, Mr. Brogan, seconded by Vice President Farley. This board approve the minutes of the December 3rd, 2020 regular meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstaining. Record 5 votes in the affirmative to approve the minutes for December 3rd. Item 7, student success stories, or CTE electrical update.
We're going to move that to January.
Okay.
Not quite ready just yet.
Instructional initiatives.
we're just continuing on working with Dr. Edwards with our standards and our assessments. We're continuing that initiative.
Item 9, community volunteerism.
We do have a young gentleman by the name of Mr. Sam Farley. He is in the 4th grade here at Hinton area, and he is part of a volunteer program that he will have to answer your questions because I can't do it for him. So he's going to help me out tonight, right? I like your attitude, all right? Are you smiling? I can't tell.
That's all right, Sam.
Sam, I love your honesty. I really appreciate that.
4th grade learned about community service. We could choose 2 options from a choice chart. I chose donating clothes to the school clothes closet and recording myself reading The Night Before Christmas to a lower grade. My friend Caleb sent a card to a child in St. Jude's Hospital. Logan donated pet supplies to an animal shelter. Other people sent cards to veterans and wrote letters to a nursing home. I enjoyed doing this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Very good.
You did a good job.
Sam, it's over. You can now smile.
You notice he fled before he
Yes.
questioned.
Okay, Sam, that's fine. We appreciate it.
Make sure they take you to McDonald's or Pizza Hut after, is that right?
Get that.
There you go. I can spend your parents' money, not a problem.
We will now move to item 10, approval of bills. We have before us 2 purchases over $20,000.
Yes. The one is, this is where you make a blanket. We don't necessarily gonna spend that much money, but you have to put it out there. Rogers Oil, with past history, we're looking around 50,000. I hope we get to that level, but, you know, we are going into a cold season, and that just happens to work that way with heating. Trinity is the other one. That is our technology that we use. So that's, the first one is county money we would use for our source. And then the technology would be step 7B that we get from the State Department would be the source for that one. And those are the 2 that we have on the agenda for tonight.
And these are ongoing and are necessary for the daily operation of the school system, and they've been approved in the past, and so that's should be no issue, I would think, with anybody. Are there any other bills I looked? Is that?
I called today and got my items answered, so I make a motion we approve the bills for payment.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor, Mr. Angel, seconded by Mr. McBride, that this board approve the purchase over $20,000 as presented to us by the superintendent and the CSBO. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstaining. 5-0 vote affirmative, the purchase over $20,000 were approved by this board.
Was that all bills?
Was that all bills or was that just the
Just
He
bills?
just said it was these 2.
Okay.
Just these 2. I hope I didn't miss.
There are other bills.
Mr. Warble,
We still have-
point of order.
Do what?
Oh, we don't.
Point of order. The new business had the purchases over
The
20.
new business had, if you're going with Robert's Rules of Order here, you jumped from approval of bills to the new business.
So the new business was approved purchases over $20,000. That's item 13.
You were on item 10, and you melded 13 and 10 together.
We need to strike that because strike that and start over.
Well, the only bills we discussed were, at this point, we were talking about the purchase over $20,000.
Okay.
So we didn't say anything about the other.
Okay.
We did these as a separate entity.
Yeah, he said this specifically.
Okay.
So we're okay on that, by rules of order. I guess I may be wrong, but we didn't have any transferring supplements, did we?
No.
And we didn't have any old business.
No.
So we were ready to go to new business, so we did approve purchases over 20,000. Now, we specifically have a list of bills other than these that we need to bring in. Thank you all for pointing that out to me. So,
Let's pull out safe and sound, do that separately.
okay. I didn't have that list, I was looking for them in here. Any on there for Jameson Law and?
I didn't
McGraw
see
County?
that.
No, you're clear.
No, it's the safe and sound.
Safe and sound
It's
bills?
one per county for the deal on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
If you're wanting to get rid of me, Mr. Ward, there's an opportunity. Okay, so there's none on there for McGraw Hill or Jameson Law, okay. The chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills except for safe and sound security.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Brogan, seconded by Vice President Farley. This board pay the bills as presented to us by the superintendent of CSBO, with the exception of safe and sound, which we will deal with separately. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstain. Okay. 5 members have voted in the affirmative to pay those bills, with the exception of safe and sound.
I make a motion to pay safe and sound.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, chair will second it, that this board pay the bills presented to us for safe and sound. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
Aye.
Okay, 4 votes in the affirmative to approve those bills, or approve the safe and sound bill, and please note that Mr. Brogan abstained from that. Yeah. That now brings us down to, item 13B. Approve policy 8-N-3 requisitioning procedures policy.
Yeah, this, policy we tried to clean up. Before I was hired, there was a problem with purchasing, and purchasing procedures were out of order here. We were able to clean that up. We got some PD from Amy Willard from the State Department. We tried to, put everything in order the way we should. Like Trey said, this is what the state board does, this is what our board should do. And we cleaned that up to make sure this is the right way that we purchase.
So Amy Willard has seen this, and you all worked on it with her.
Well, we pretty much took it verbatim right out of policy because we weren't doing that here in the past.
Okay. You all have heard policy 8-N-3, requisition procedures policy. And I think that you're saying that's been taken from policy 8200, and that Amy Willard, who is in charge of finances in Charleston, so it looks like this is good to go. The chair moves that we approve policy 8-N-3 requisition procedures policy.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor for chair, seconded by Mr. Angel. This board approve policy 8-N-3 requisitioning procedures policy. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? 5 votes in the affirmative, this board has approved policy 8-N-3 requisitioning procedures policy. That brings us to item 14, personnel items, and the chair will move that we go into executive session, subject to 6-9A-4, for paragraph 2, personnel. There's a motion on the floor. Motion on the floor of the chair, second Mr. Brogan, that this board go into executive session under personnel 6-9A-4, paragraph 2, personnel. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 5 votes in the affirmative, this board will go into executive session. We will return shortly.
Guys.
The time is 7:10 p.m. and the chair calls this meeting back to order, coming out of executive session for personnel. Start item 14 under professional, that was stricken from the agenda. That brings us down to employment recommendation by the superintendent for service personnel, as well as leave request service. These names and all this information have been published on the agenda. All board members have copies, so we can just note the meeting law. It's been out there for everybody. We will do the retirements separately. So at this time, members, we have before us recommendation by the superintendent for service personnel employment, Josiah Cox. We have leave request, service personnel recommended to us by the superintendent for John Gill. The chair moves that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for service personnel employment and leave request by service personnel individual. All of this information has been published and discussed, I mentioned.
I'll second.
Motion on the floor of the chair, seconded by Vice President Farley, that the board accept the recommendation of Superintendent Warble on the employment of service personnel and the leave request service personnel. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? 5 votes in the affirmative, Mr. Warble, for your recommendation on service personnel hiring and service personnel leave request. That brings us forward to under personnel, resignation, retirement, professional, and these names have been presented. It's tough to lose people, but people have a right to resign, and so we have before us Christina Rose, Dave Smith, and Ronnie Clay, and these have been recommended to us by the superintendent. The chair would move that we accept this recommendation for retirement or resignation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by the chair, second by Mr. Angel, that this board accept the superintendent's recommendation for resignation and retirement of 3 mentioned individuals. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? 5 votes in the affirmative to approve the superintendent's recommendation for the resignations and retirements listed on the agenda. That brings us forward. Do we have any in or out of county requests?
No.
Okay. We move now to item 16, superintendent's report. It's an update on second semester school schedule.
Okay, can you pull that up there for me, Mr. Mercer? We had a survey down in the county from parents, about how it went the first semester, or first 9 weeks of school, because we're already in the second 9 weeks, and the semester ends the middle of next month. And then I met with some students to hear their personal opinions on how things are going. And the biggest problem that we're having with our education right now is, yeah, it's COVID, but the results of that are not too great when you look at the option 2 blended model. We have a lot of students who are not really getting on at the right times. They're really not getting the homework done in a timely manner. There's miscommunication. There's just a lot of things that have moving parts, and we'd like to try to make it better for second semester. So looking at the data that we have, and I know Mr. Lester has some data he can show in a little bit, but our option 3 students that are with the virtual through proximity, this company has done this for a while, so they got it down to a science. They have a live teacher during those hours when those kids get on. So that's not been an issue. That's actually working out really well. They got a lot of good marks because they've done it before, they know how to do it, and they're very effective. The kids in those classes right now online one person that has an F or multiple people that have Fs is only 8% out of all the students. 8% is a very low rate of someone having an F or more Fs, but they have at least one F. And that's up there on the board for you guys to see. It's actually 8.11%. If you look at our school system, if you just take the whole county at the bottom, it's around 24.29%. So 1 out of 4 of our students in option 1 or 2 are receiving a F, at least one F. That is no reflection on our teaching staff. That's just the data. And part of it is it the skill or is it the will when students get these assignments? So you have to ask yourself, is it an academic issue or is it a behavioral issue? And I would submit to most people, if you had me back in school, I need to be in school with the teacher, because if I was sitting at home online, I just wouldn't be that kind of student. I would probably end up getting an F because it's more my will is not there. That's not me. I don't like to sit at a computer. I'm not that kind of person even today as an adult. I'd rather be in person with learning environment. Having said that, that's the data we're getting back. If we have 1 out of 4 kids with at least one F, I think people have got a misconception from last school year in March. A lot of people in all 50 states said, just do the work and we're not going to penalize you and you'll pass on to the next grade level. That was pretty much the thing in the United States of America. Again, nobody's fault, it's just what happened. I think what's going on right now is you've got a lot of people frustrated with COVID, they're fatigued with it, they're tired of it, whatever. I don't know the reason, but we have 1 out of 4 students getting an F. We can't have that anymore. So what we're going to do is work with the staff. When we go on Christmas break, we'll come back that first week in January and go remote learning. And we need to work with our staff on teaching students live online. So if you're an option 2 student and you want to continue option 2, that's fine. We're not forcing you to come back in the classroom, but we need it to be live 4 days a week so we can get the material to our students, so we can see a hit rate like the one with the online school where it goes down to 8%. I hope nobody gets an F, but let's be honest. There are kids that are going to get a failing grade at some point in time. I just don't want it to be 1 out of 4 students. I'd rather it be an 8%, under 10%, even 5% would be better, but those are some huge numbers from that. Mr. Lester, is there anything else you can add? Because I know you helped out with pulling this data down for us.
Well, the principals helped out in getting the data. I think one thing to note is this is the number of students failing at least one class in the first 9 weeks. The reason we didn't take the second, we hadn't had complete data yet, but some students may have multiple Fs, but that doesn't account for the number of classes. And I just want to make sure people understand the data. This isn't number of classes or subjects with the number of Fs. This is the number of students with at least one failing grade. But that's the only clarification.
Is there any questions about this data so far before we move forward? Okay, so what that has led in, I had the tips with Mr. Lester with technology, talked to them and the principals, and I asked questions on what can we do to make things better. So we looked at starting January 25th next year, that's a little over a month away. We'd like to do options 1, 2, and 3 differently. Like to go to school 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and do this live where we can help these students out. If you're a student that can get internet at home and you can see the teacher live, that's fine. You keep doing that. But if you do not have internet access at home and it's not working well, and the only way I can do this is my principals know their students better than I, they will make those phone calls and talk to parents and have those conversations. They will come to option 1 and go to school. If we have too many kids in the building and it's starting to look like we're getting more than we should, we still have to follow CDC guidelines with staying socially distant. We have a middle school gym that we could use for an internet hall, and we could work that out. We also have a gymnasium at the high school. And then the elementaries, I was told they have room to adjust that with classrooms and their media center. The elementary is going to be a little bit easier to handle than the secondary. So we will go through some bumps in the roads, but you can see at the bottom there, it says it may change due to the county alert map. We still will follow the map. If we're green or yellow, we can still go. But if we start getting into that orange, red, obviously we gotta go remote. That'll still be the same thing we're doing. What we're doing is we're adding 2 more days to the school week, and we wanna make sure our kids get their education, because right now we have a lot of students that aren't getting the education. And again, that's not the fault of teachers, that's not the fault of parents, that's not the fault of students. But there has to be a way to get these kids their education, their social emotional attachments that we have to work on with getting through life, because right now life is a little depressing because you're being told you can't do X all the time. And it's really frustrating for everybody. So you can see the option 1 is still in person, option 2 is remote blended still, and option 3, if you're happy with proximity, which most people are, I don't think that's a big deal. We just can't put people in proximity if they want to go online, because now you're going in the middle of a class that you didn't go through the first semester. So what we would do is work with them and say, if you want strictly remote, you stick with option 2. I don't know if we'll have more kids in the building. We're going to probably have a few more. At the high school and the middle school is going to be a little bit tougher, but I can tell you right now, if you're pre-K through 8th grade, I just want to focus on 4 core subjects. All the electives we'll get to as quickly as we can, but right now, we have to focus on the 4-4. Our kids really need to focus on that right now. All that other stuff is great, don't get me wrong, we can work that out in the schedule, but our time of going to school will be the same. It's just within that day, how does the school manipulate that to make it work for the students and to help them out? And then also our teachers giving them enough time to make sure they have a classroom that is quote unquote socially distanced from one another as easy as we can. And that is a push-pull all the time. I've talked to Mr. Boone about transportation. He says they've got that figured out. Talked to Greenbrier County Schools in Mercer County that are currently on a 4 to 5 day model. Monroe County is now going to a 4-day model. A lot of the schools are starting to look at going to school 4 days because we're finding out with research, and that's what I'm going to share with you next. We had an epidemiologist from the state level. She talked to us today. You guys have a handout of this, and Mr. Lester, can you just pull up my PowerPoint real quick? I brought Mr. Metter here with me because he knows this in and out better than I do, and in life I've learned to surround myself with people much smarter than me, and I told him if he could just help me with this slideshow. I know where the clicker is, we'll work on this together. This was by the epidemiologist here at the state level. You guys have a packet in your file there. You remember her name? I just lost it.
Her name's Shannon McBee.
Thank you, sir.
Shannon is, I'll just tell you who she is. I'll tell you her title. She's the outbreak epidemiologist and regional epidemiologist for the state of West Virginia. She belongs to the Division of Infectious Disease and Epidemiology. And she does work for West Virginia DHHR. So she's a DHHR employee. And I know Shannon personally, and she does a great job at what she does.
So basically, this is what we met with State Superintendent Clayton Birch and his team, and then like I said, we met with the epidemiologist to go over some information. This is the outbreak trends in school settings. I want people to understand there's a difference between an outbreak and quarantining. Outbreak and quarantine are not equal, correct? And an outbreak is 2 or more.
Correct.
So I want people to understand, you don't want to say they got quarantined, that was an outbreak. Because sometimes quarantining is just a contact and we had to separate people out because of that. So you can see the data here. I don't want to read this all to you all, but this is what's going on in our school system. There's 55 counties, but they had confirmed cases in 44. Our county is one that's been very fortunate. And if you look at the county map, I'm not going to say anything, just look at the county map. the color of this table, and I like that color right now. It's working out pretty well. So I appreciate everybody working hard to keep that like it is. But you can kind of see exactly what's going on with the students versus the staff on outbreaks that are occurring in the state of West Virginia. The next one is our state again. You can see August to December. I'm still confused on August because we didn't start school till September, but I don't know, there's 5. We all started in September, and you can see the numbers. October, you can see what's going on there. You had Halloween. November, Thanksgiving. December, she said today, that number could creep up pretty quickly if people don't learn from October and November when they get together with family and they socially gather. So just to let you guys know, that's why we want to go that first week back to school. And January is remote learning, so we can kind of see the trends and see if there's a problem in our state, if they're still rising, which it wouldn't surprise me.
I'll just add one small snippet. We've been dealing with Thanksgiving break positives for about the past 7 to 10 days. And that's when people are home. That's when they're traveling. That's when they're with their family. So I agree with Mr. Warble. I think December's numbers could creep up just like November.
As we look at the schools here, this is just showing in our state elementaries the number of outbreaks to down to the technical centers. It's kind of funny because it's interesting because the bus garage, I do know that a county near us had a problem there just recently, and it's amazing if a mechanic or a bus driver and a couple others get together, that could hurt your sub rates too. And all of a sudden it shuts down the school system because you don't have enough employees. So that's what we're dealing with in the state of West Virginia there with some numbers of outbreaks. Who was impacted, you can read that yourselves. Like I said, I don't want to read through this. I got this PowerPoint today. But you can see what happens. In-person meetings, congregating in break rooms. Who does that? Well, we do here at work. We're all guilty of that. I've been in break rooms, I've been in the cafeteria, and I've been with bus drivers. I think everybody in this room, including myself, has gotten together with people, and we probably shouldn't have done that type of meeting. It happens. We're humans. We gather. It's what we do. But we need to do a better job of not doing that. We have to help each other out. But you can see the outbreaks that involve students, and guess where the most of them are happening in? Nothing against sports, because I like sports too, but you can see our sports teams are where it's at. It's not in the academic rooms. It's around sports-related activities. Why is that? Well, I know when I played football, that's not a game where you don't not see or hit somebody. And let's be honest, sweat, blood, and anything else you can think of with the human body is transmitted. And I know I'm being gross, but let's be honest, you're sweating, you're exerting energy, and you're breathing on top of each other. And like our coaches said, get your mouthpiece and put it in your mouth. So that's gross, but you know that's not what you're doing in the classroom. And then your outbreaks involve students and staff. There's about 39% is what they're saying there. If you go to the next one, you can see the sports teams. They have the data, football, volleyball, and other. Outbreaks of students or staff becoming infected through close contact with a case of being associated with an outbreak in the community. That's going to happen easily if you're in a small community or you go to church. You could be associated with that real quickly. Outbreak transmissions in the school setting, they have the data there with that going on, but the social gatherings are the biggest ones where you're eating together, and that's where you get yourself into trouble. Even here in this building, we try to eat in our offices, and it's just really weird not eating together, but you have to force yourself to stay away from one another. 10 outbreaks resulted in only a single student and a teacher developing illnesses. Outbreak transmission was not documented on 16 of them. I don't know why, but that's the data that we have. The next slide is schools are safe and should remain open despite increased transmission. Schools don't pose a threat. They're one of the safest places. No data has been shown nationwide that the virus is being spread through the school setting as long as you're making the kids and people in the building wear the mask and try to stay social distance. I can honestly say the hardest part for us having 4 days of school is the social distancing. That's gonna be the most difficult. Wearing masks and washing hands, our kids are good, they do that, that's not an issue. But, you can look at the last 3 months, face-to-face learning, you can do it safely. And then the last one about research, about schools, we really need to remain open, but that last point says social distancing works. And then there's some data at the bottom where they got their source from. The last couple slides here, this is what we're doing. We're trying to wear our mask correctly. We try to social distance. I think we do a pretty good job with hand hygiene. I know Mr. Widows has purchased even more tubs of the bottles that we squirt our hands with alcohol, and then the disinfecting wipes. We have plenty of that. I know Mr. Boone has, did you end up getting the buses, each get one?
We're in the process. They haven't got them yet, but should be
Proton
within
packs?
the next week. We have several, but we should have them for each bus within the next week.
Mr. Boone's doing it legally and ethically. I don't ask too many questions, but he is getting one proton pack for each bus. And the ones we've already bought then can be used in the school, so that can be done daily, and each bus will have a proton pack number to match with it, so it's always with that bus. So we're trying to help out with that daily as much as possible. And then this is the one I really like. Mr. Metter's sitting right beside me, contact tracing in collaboration with the local health department. There are other superintendents that don't care for their health department officials. I like working with Chad. I don't know if he feels the same way about me, we won't ask him that right now, but I can say I always ask him plenty of questions and work with him because he knows his stuff and I should learn from him and stay out of his way. So I enjoy working with him in the health department. The World Children data shows that we have 191 countries, that there's no link reopening schools and increased rate of COVID. You can see the other two. We just need to follow the guidelines and get our kids back into school, guys, 4 days a week. And then you can see here, this is the big one that I'm concerned about, the first bullet. We look at kids with education, but we have to look at their health care, their nutrition, their social and child protection services. If you look at that, each child has been deprived, 45% have been deprived of one of those. Let's say you're a kid that comes from a really good home, you have both parents, you don't have to worry about money and food and all that. You still have to worry about education. That's one of them. The other ones we're dealing with that I'm concerned with when kids do finally come back to school is, can they socially interact with one another, or have they gotten used to more and more technology and not interacting with human beings? I would submit to you we can make it work, but it's going to be tough, and our discipline rates will go up because they've been left to their own devices. And my grandma always said, idle hands is devil's work. I didn't understand that until you get older and realize you need to be busy doing something. And you got to, if you practice what you preach, you better watch what you practice sometimes when you do stuff. And we need to get them back in school. You can see child-to-child transmission isn't the big issue. The biggest issue will be child to teacher. Now, the good news is we have vaccines coming forth. Our staff here got an email today with a K-12, and our subs will all get a vaccine if they want one. You don't have to get one, but we will be getting a Moderna vaccine, and we'll get 2 doses just like the Pfizer one. Mr. Metter and I have been working together on that. We've been talking how do you get everybody their vaccines, and everything is always to be determined because we're just waiting on Moderna to get the go, and then we get the vaccines to our state, and then the next part is who injects it into your arm and get that done in a timely fashion. But all school employees and subs will get the vaccine as long as they say they want it. If they don't want it, that's fine. It's a free country, you don't have to get the vaccine. But I can say that I'm getting one. I know the guy to my right, you got yours at noon today? You survived?
Right.
Okay.
Feeling good too.
Okay. I thought it was because you were sitting by it. But anyway, summary. You can see the rest of it about West Virginia. Limited transmission has happened in West Virginia schools. Most of the virus has been spread outside of the school environment, and that's because when you're around your family at home, you get lax sometimes, and that's no fault of anybody, but we're humans, and that's what we do. We should try to remain open and try to continue to do what the CDC guidelines are. And I have to give my staff a lot of kudos. They really try hard to keep the building clean and try to wear the mask and reinforce that by showing kids what you should do. The kids are doing a great job this school year. We really haven't had any issues with it. Kids are doing a lot better than I thought they would, because at the end of the school year I thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old want to wear a mask all day. That's not, I know I don't want to at my age, but long story short, that's where we are with the data. I do have Mr. Metter here to take the tough questions. I will only take the easy questions. If you have any questions, we'll go ahead and take those right now. I know we have a lot with the 3 options of school, how that'll look, and then we also have some data here. But I want to open up to you guys for any questions, unless you have anything to add from your point of view with your report. Do you have anything to add? Did I get it all? Okay.
Superintendent Warble, in looking at this, it's a plan at this point. It's a plan that between now and, what did you say, the 25th of January?
Yes.
It's a plan that could change, correct?
It's kind of like the governor did at the beginning of the school year. It's a target. We'll try.
So this is fluid.
Very fluid.
Very fluid. But we have to look ahead and start putting together some type of parameters and some plans for resuming as much as possible normal education. But we have between now and the 25th of January, and we'll be observing, analyzing data and everything as we go forward, correct?
Yes.
Anybody else have some questions or points you'd like to make?
I was just curious as to how you have the start date as January technically, or tentatively, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Tentatively is January 25th. How does this line up with possible vaccinations?
The vaccinations, and I don't like to speculate, but here's what I understand today with the State Department. Sounds to me like Moderna's gonna get the green light in the today to next week. And then by the time it gets to our state in January, we should have it in our arms by January. I don't think it'll be January the first week or the second week, but I would think somewhere in the middle of the month of January, we should get that first dose, somewhere around there. That's the tentative timeline.
So as part of the fluidity of this, trying to get the vaccines before we go.
Yeah. And I think if we don't have the vaccines for everybody, because the biggest thing that people are concerned about, and I am too, if I'm taking care of someone elderly at the house, or let's say we have more grandfamilies, more grandparents are taking care of the kids, if people are getting their vaccines, the elderly population will be getting theirs before even school officials. But if all of us are getting a vaccine, that's going to help mitigate a lot of problems from transmission from student to an adult. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. Mander, what's the timeline from getting the shot to being cured of the COVID?
Well, I
cancer?
guess it would depend on what group you're asking for about. I mean, if you're asking about teachers and service personnel, I think, just to echo Mr. Warble's thoughts, I'm hearing the 1st of January.
Yeah, but once you take the shot,
Right.
how long before you're not going to be able to get the COVID, or it lessens your chance of getting it?
Well, you are at 94 to 95% covered, if you will, after the second dose. So with the Moderna vaccine, it's 28 days. So after the first vaccine, within 28 days, there's a 4-day window. You need to get that second dose. With the Pfizer vaccine, it's 21 days. So depending on what vaccine we get, like today at our office, we have the Pfizer vaccine. So 21 days from today, I'll be taking the second vaccine, and it should be 94 to 95% of coverage. As far as the general population, I'll just throw this out. General population, you're looking at probably sometime in March, 1st of April. I think it'll be in March.
Can you explain option 2? What should the kids be getting at home?
What we're doing is, and Ms. Schaefer and Mr. Lester are here to assist me, hopefully, on technology. But we've already, from what we've done in the past, before we start school, we've got them to understand. I'm gonna use Miss Vega as a great example. What I've seen Miss Vega do, and this is coming from parents and students and even my own observation, and she probably won't like that I'm touting how good she's doing, but she teaches live. So if you have internet at home, you get Miss Vega live, like the option 3 would give you someone live. I don't want to do self-paced. Self-paced doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Now for some kids, it does. But for the majority of us in this room, we all need someone to keep an eye over us and make sure they're pushing us. And it's like that with anything in life. Some people just aren't self-directed at that age either. So you need a teacher to work with them live. So our teachers have the capability with all the Google Classroom stuff that we have. We're trying to support the teachers on giving them less work and not adding more work. They just, when they're in their classroom, like he has this camera sitting up here with your laptop, you can teach to all your students virtually, and anybody that's in your classroom will be in there. There is a capability now that we have that you can fuzzy out anybody in the room with you. So no students will be disclosed because we have FERPA rules. So the good thing is we have that technology. The problem is, and I'm one of those people too, I didn't go to college to teach like this. So it's okay. We just didn't do as well as we'd like to the first part of the year. So now we have to go back and say, okay guys, we gotta make adjustments. So what are those adjustments? And I would say people like Miss Vega, we need to look at how she does it, and don't do it exactly like her, but you're allowed to take from her. If she's modeling good teaching techniques, then use them. At the elementary level, I'd have Ms. Schaefer kind of explain that, but what I understand is there's some teachers that do team teaching already, and what they are starting to agree on is, I'm better at technology, I'll do it live, you get the rest of them. So I'm okay with either one, but we have to teach live to these kids because a lot of these people have signed up thinking they had enough internet connectivity, and they don't. And they have to get their kids in school and do option 1. Now, if they're concerned about socially being close to kids, we have some big areas of room to just spread kids out, give them the headset, give them a computer, and see their teachers live. But this isn't a sit and get where I'm self-directed or I get assignments just thrown at me. This is where we need our teachers to interact with our students. Ms. Schaefer, was that decent?
Perfect. It was
Anything
good.
else at the elementary to add to that? Okay, is there anything else with the secondary?
Can I add some?
Sure, as long as it answers my question,
Yeah, it does.
or his question, sorry.
It does. This is very similar to what we already, the framework was already there. But there was 3 data points that we used to make the changes in here. And those 3 data points were, 1, the parent survey, that we had almost 300 replies. And those are for families. And then we had our statistics of how many students had a less than a passing grade, right? So the main changes in 1, it's 4 days. 2, you're requiring a live class session, which brings us in line with our peer counties around us. Because the self-paced is where we're losing the 30-some% that we saw in that option 2. And then we're giving them an out. We're giving them the ability to still be socially distanced and not with the cohort of students. If they don't have the internet, they can still have the option of being in a socially distanced area that doesn't change classes and so forth. But we're using, and the third and probably the most important data points that we used is the students came in and met with Mr. Warble, middle school and high school students primarily, and they said, this isn't working the way it was. And there are a lot of people out there that feel that these grades are just going to get washed away for the year. They're not taking this, they don't understand the permanence of this isn't a thrown away class year. And the other piece was one, and they all echoed this, is, well, the reason I don't do option one is that my friends aren't there, so I don't want to be there. So the social pieces, we're social human beings, and we took all these data points. We took the parents, the students, and then the passing and failing parts, and that's what dictated these pieces.
On Wednesday, what we liked was we agreed that 9 to 12, and we can do the busing. If you're getting a failing grade, we want you to get that grade back. We don't want to be punitive and say, you failed. That's a failure in teaching, is to assign a failing grade and there's nothing done about it. Now, the best way to handle that is to say, we will bus your child to school from 9 to 12 or 9 to 11ish. They'll get a lunch and you go back home. Then they get, that would be a 5th day for them, because we want those kids to get caught up. They gotta get caught up. We can't just say, we're chucking it to 2020, we hated 2020, but you're still gonna pass my kid. That's not the point. It's not about passing and failing, it's about understanding what they're being taught and the mastery of it. Because our pre-K through 3 right now are in danger of their future with not getting the foundations of a good education. And if you're at the other end, if you're a junior or senior, especially the seniors, you've missed 2 years out of 4 being a typical high school kid, getting stuff for your diploma to move on to work, military, or college. So we just want to try to move towards 4 days, guys. We've had other counties doing it this whole school year. I think it's time for us to take a serious look at moving in that direction.
The reason I asked about option 2, I had a parent I talked to the other day, Mrs. Vandal had done a live presentation. She said if it was all like that, we'd have no problem at all.
Okay. You said Vandal?
Mrs. Vandal.
Okay, there's another good one that we can use. I just think if we have teachers that are successful at it and they're getting good feedback, why don't we just have those teachers help teach other teachers how to do it and just work with us? And we have our tips here that are more than willing to help them out. I think like anything else, it's not exciting to do something that different that you've never done before. Who wants to stand in front of a camera and do that? I don't. I bet a lot of people didn't know anything about Zoom or Teams or any of that stuff before this year came about. Now we know everybody's getting Zoomed out and Teamed out. I never thought I'd ever say something like that, but that's the new vocabulary word. So that's what we're dealing with, and I think it would be better to be in person than do self-directed. There's self-directed stuff you can do, but you really need your teacher working with the student and helping them out.
Do any other members have any points you'd like to make or questions you'd like to address to Superintendent Ward?
Not to Mr. Ward. Mr. Hartwell, are you still faculty senate president?
No, sir.
That's all I had then.
Okay.
Mr. Clay is at our school, if that's what.
I know this option one's a hot point of contention right now. I just wondered if what anybody's heard tonight might have put out any fires.
Well, we're not making any changes now, so it'll be end of January if anything's done.
I would just like to, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I would just like to, sort of setting this aside for just a minute. I noticed the intervention for anyone with a below passing grade. I feel like that is very important, and I don't know what all we can do. A lot of these, I think especially the children in elementary school, they've already lost a half of a school year from March through the end of the school year. And so when they picked up, they were starting fresh in a new grade. And that material was not covered based on time constraints and requirements that the state would have for that particular grade, those objectives being met. So I would like to, if we can in some way help those. I know in my own household, a lot of times tables were missed. We spent a lot of time, just working on basic math facts that normally they would have gotten already. And that, if you don't have that foundation, you can't move forward.
And just think, if you're a kindergartner last year, and now you got moved to first grade just past fall, and you're done, and you go into second grade next year, you technically could still be at kindergarten level as a second grader. That's the part that's really getting a little heavy right now when we talk, and it's not about grades right now. It's not about passing and failing. It's about, did I master this so I can move forward? And we got some, we're in a serious situation where we gotta start looking at a different way of moving forward. But we're not gonna move too quickly, but we still have to have a plan, and we have to look at the 25th as a start date. If we have to adjust it, we adjust it to February. You've gotta have a plan of something to move forward, and you can't just go, well, it's COVID. I'm tired of hearing it's COVID. There's always an excuse. I know this is a serious excuse, but I feel like we're getting a little bit of a light where this vaccine's coming forward. And people have to understand that 95%, like you just said, out of 100 people, even if you take the vaccine, you still have 5% out of that 100 that could get, that you're still going to get COVID. I mean, it's not 100%, but I'll take 90, 95%, but you know, at this point in time, I feel like we have a lot more light at the end of the tunnel than we did when we first started this school year. So we'll just have to see if this works, and we'll keep moving forward. We'll try to put everybody's fears aside as much as possible, but we'll see what we can do with this. It's very fluid right now, and we use the county, the maps that are provided for us from the State Department.
Superintendent Warble, I know we've been here for a while, but there's some things, I apologize in advance, there's a few questions or things that I'd like to make. One, I seem to recall that in child development, that there are ages of readiness to learn. And so, you know, there's been serious disruption since last February or March. We've determined that a lot of what's going on now is not working. We have kids who are at risk, not just from a time factor, but isn't there certain things that there's a readiness time to learn, and as you get older, it's a little bit more difficult to learn some of these things? Is that true or not?
Not only that, but you can actually be in a situation where it's going to be even more interventions to catch those kids back up because they lost so much foundational material. And you know, when people talk about the summer slide, we're having a COVID slide, and we might start thinking about this summer with some summer schooling and look at that. We have some COVID money. We might want to look at doing the catch up with the students and start looking that way too, because this isn't going to go away. And you're right, there is a problem with that.
Okay.
Do we have any COVID money we're in danger of losing?
No, they want us to spend it because there's a convoluted formula with drawdown. And if you're not looking like you're spending your money, it's kind of weird. They told you to keep it for you got 2 years. But the federal government looks at it a little bit differently, and your numbers don't draw down until 4 to 6 months out. So it looks like we have money, but we're actually spending it. Everybody is. It's just the drawing down is different than drawing down out of your own personal bank account, because I know it draws down real quick when I spend my own personal bank account. But it's different with federal and state dollars. But anyway.
I have done some research with neighboring county, and I don't know how many people are aware of this. Greenbrier County, their entire county, for their K-5, they have been in school 5 days a week, every day since school started. So a county next to us has been going to school with their K-5 children 5 days a week, every day. Now, there was a couple of days break where they went remote, but they have been doing that since we started school, and they've had very positive experiences with it. They have done something different in middle and high school, and curiously enough, it's very similar to what we're doing at this point. And they've had more issues with their middle and high school, and the person I spoke to, who's in the middle of that and should know, says their belief is that during those days where they're not in school, that 3 days where they're not in school, those kids are going lots of different places, and their position is that in school, in a controlled environment, they have found that their elementary kids are doing very well with it. So I think that's an important thing to consider.
Greenbrier County just went into the red today, didn't
Yeah, but they didn't go into red as a result of their school setting and what they had doing.
they? Not to take a trace back.
No, not take trace back. So they are, doing remote now because of the overall, which we would do that too if we went into red, correct?
Yes. You have to. That's best practice anyway.
Mr. Warble, I know I was in here one day and you routinely, you have meetings with a 14-county group of superintendents, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you share with us a little bit about what the superintendents in those other 14 counties that you were involved with, how are they looking at this? What's their thinking about second semester with fluid or somewhere in the future? Anything you can report to us on that? Has that been discussed?
Well, basically, the talk is this: how can we get our kids back into school more days than not? And everybody has a different way of getting there, but not to call anybody out, but there's a lot of discussion with the superintendents and their boards of education dealing with how do we do this in a safe way, but get them back into school more than what we've been doing. And so everybody's looking at going this route. When I mean this route, not necessarily exactly this way, but somewhat similar. Everybody's trying to get to 4 to 5 days of school.
Okay. What, just in general, what is the CDC saying about students going back to school or being in school? Have they taken a recent position?
Well, basically, that PowerPoint I gave you from
That was a state epidemiologist, right?
yeah, she's basically saying the same thing. The guidelines are the same. The hardest part for schools is the social distancing. Everything else is a lot easier to handle. Keeping the school clean, wearing a mask, staying socially distant is not the easy thing to do, because as humans, it's just not natural to have conversations 6 feet apart, or to not go and say hi to someone, give them a hug, give them a high five, all that stuff. It's just not how we are as humans. That's the difficult piece to all this. But the transmission rate is low in schools because, let's be honest, as a parent, you can tell your kids something at home, but man, if a teacher says it, it's just different. They listen. It's with your own kids too. It's like, I say that all the time, and my teacher says it, and now it's like the gospel. And I said, that's just life. And I think kids behave a lot better in the school setting because they know it's very serious with all the regulations that are going on. We're following the CDC guidelines like they've been told to do. So that will stay the same.
With the option 2 that will still be available, I want to make this clear that I understood you. Students who have good internet receptivity in their homes, if they elect to stay, they can stay there, but they will be getting live instruction. In other words, it won't be recorded instruction, it'll be live instruction in which they are expected to be there based on their school schedule. Is that correct?
Yes, the only way it could become recorded or self-directed is in a situation that's an unforeseen. You do have some teachers that could have a sick day, you have long-term subs, those kind of things where the sub would come in. We're also going to work on training our subs on this as well. We're going to bring them and work with our subs. That black box in the middle does say that attendance will be taken during that time. So our Google account that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lester, automatically does attendance for them, right?
So the tips, we meet regularly. About once every 2 weeks, we have a group meeting, and we talk about the issues, and then we kind of like you guys do here, except at a lower level. And one thing we're doing is we're going to upgrade our Google management to Enterprise, which turns on some features for our teachers as far as automated attendance reports after each session that they will get in their email. They can pull that and they can send that to the secretary, and the secretary could use that for the attendance for the day. It will have breakout sessions. So for instance, if you want your group to break out and work in group projects, they can do that and still be in the Google Meet session, and then they can be brought back into the main class. Other features as like the blurring out the background, the background noise reduction, recording and the storage, the amount of storage we get for recording, all of that. So the session can be recorded. So if somebody was sick and missed class, that whole entire class session is ready and available to them immediately. So there are things that you'll see that purchase request or that bill probably in your January meeting. But we're not just giving them a problem. We're trying to help them solve. We know it's going to be stressful. We know it's all new. No one's been in a pandemic, but I definitely think this is a step in the right direction as far as that live instruction. And the only issue will be is making sure the people that don't have internet access, they actually understand the value of sending their kids back to that internet study hall where they will not be in the cohort, where they will be in a more socially distanced area, because we don't want to lose them.
Superintendent Warner, is there anything you can share with the board on a perspective, say from the state board or from the State Department of Education? Have you had any conversations with them on anything like this? Any perspective there?
Just what I've said today with our Wednesday meeting with the state and Deb about that PowerPoint I shared, they want us to move in this direction because a lot of the things that the state superintendent's frustrated with, and I can echo that, is I'm not hearing enough chatter of, I don't want to say this to sound mean, I'm trying to be very careful how I choose my words here, but there isn't a lot of people that are saying, what can we do to help these kids out to get them back to school more days than not, so we can help support these children, because right now they're at risk. And how do we address that, and how do we go forward with that? It's not an easy thing because it's a push and pull. You're dealing with humans who have to teach the material and take care of those kids, and so it's a push and pull with working with our teachers, our bus drivers, our service staff. It's not an easy thing, but Clayton Birch has said he's getting a lot of phone calls that pretty much people aren't focused on the child, they're focused on everything else but the child, and it's frustrating from his point of view that he's hearing this. And you hear a lot of people saying that is a little frustrating right now, because there are a lot of people who do care about the child, and they just roll their sleeves up and get after it. But we have to have more people like that than say, well, I don't want to do this, I don't like this, and I'm scared. I understand that. I truly understand that. We're trying to work with everybody to make sure they're not as scared as we can, but this vaccine that we're getting is definitely, no pun intended, a shot in the arm for everybody as we move forward with just giving us some kind of hope right now. Because I think everybody's just really fatigued and tired of this. I'm just concerned when we go home for Christmas break, people won't take this serious, and then they act like, well, I'm with my family, I can do whatever I want. It's like, but you don't understand. It's not that. It's for all humanity right now. I just recently had someone in my family die. It's not an easy pill to swallow. I get it. I'm a diabetic. My wife almost died of cancer. My mother-in-law has health issues too with COPD. I get it, guys. I get it. But you can't always live life scared. You have to control the environment you know how to control and do the best you can. But at the end of the day, we have to do something to help our kids out, because doing what we're doing now is not working. It just isn't. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm part of it too. What can you do? Get mad about it or try to do something different? I'm always the kind of guy that, I was a coach. You make adjustments. The team keeps beating me on this play. Okay, we got to stop it. We got to make adjustments. You call a timeout. You try to work with people. I would say this is my 32nd timeout I'm calling. Let's come up with a better plan, and let's see if it works. Other than that, I think Mr. Metter will get all my analogies there, because I think he wants to get back into coaching and play basketball. I want our kids to get back into archery. I want them to be kids again, and that's the tough thing that's going on right now, guys. I get it.
Okay, just a couple more quick things. this plan, we're not going off the reservation, we're still gonna follow the state map as we've been doing.
We have to, yes.
We have to do that. We talk about following the science. The most recent thing I've heard from Anthony Fauci, and we've also heard this from the CDC. Anthony Fauci the other day, this is not hearsay, I heard him say it. He said, kids are so minimally impacted by this that kids need to be back in school. Now, that's what Anthony Fauci said, and I heard him say, they need to be back in school. So, we continue to follow the science, and I'm just gonna say, you know, this has been thrown out to the board today. I'm sure everybody's gonna reflect on this and be thinking about it. It's not a decision that's being made by this board today or by the superintendent. It is a plan or a target out there on the 25th. Between now and then, it is a fluid program. We'll be looking, I'm guessing, at how much vaccine's coming out, and who knows, maybe it won't be the 25th of January, maybe it'll be the 3rd of February. But we have to have a plan. We're gonna be evaluating the situation. We've got well over a month before we have to make a decision. So, having said that, I trust the central office here, the superintendent and health department, and so I think enough said on that tonight. It's been thrown out there. We're looking at it. It's fluid, and we have to be planning ahead. Okay, having said all of that, discussion next agenda. I don't know, let's get, as far as I'm concerned, let's get Christmas over with, and we can contact you, or I'll contact you for an agenda item we'd like to put on. You will put that on, won't you, Mr.
Well, we'll have another meeting on the 22nd.
We do. We have a special meeting called on 22nd to deal with some issues that we have to deal with. We have no choice. So having said that, we won't talk about the agenda for the January meeting yet. Mrs. Spark, you're now on.
I make a motion, we adjourn.